Perfect. I don't care.
I want to thank you for joining us, Chip Comins. Welcome everybody. Here we are at this educational program and conversation with Chip Comins at the Association of Foreign Press Correspondents in the United States. For those who are watching us live on YouTube, I want to give an introduction to Chip, although I know that many of you know already his background from the invitation we had here for this conversation. Chip, welcome. Chip Comins is a renewable energy and clean technology expert and serves as the chairman and CEO of the American Renewable Energy Institute. He is the founder of AREDAY, an annual think tank on renewable energy based in Aspen, where you're originally from and where you're based. You live, Chip, right? The event is devoted to the great solution, a global leadership in technology for sustainability and global transformation toward a carbon-free, equity-based energy and economic system. Chip is also president and CEO of the American Spirit Productions and managing director of WEnergy. He's focusing and connects climate solutions in a climate constellation of implementation, acceleration, and application locally, nationally, and globally. I would also like to give an overview about what hopefully we will get into this conversation, because as the world emerges from the one economic crisis to the next, brought on by resource scarcity, war, and ongoing debate on the future of fossil fuels, the question is, what alternatives do we really have? And I would like to start this conversation with this number one question: what are the alternatives that we really have? And if the world is doomed to go from the one energy crisis to the other?
Well, thank you, Thanos, and it's my pleasure, my great pleasure to be here with the foreign press. We at the American Renewable Energy Institute are very dedicated to our mission, which is, simply put, the rapid transition from fossil fuel to renewable energy at the speed and scale necessary to solve the climate crisis. That's what we do. And so in order to accurately address your question, would you mind repeating it for me?
The question is: is the world doomed to go from the one energy crisis to the other? What is the solution to this energy crisis that every 40 or 50 years the world is facing? The one was in 70s, as we remember. Now we are considered to be in another energy crisis.
Right. So the energy crisis that we face is a crisis of in my humble opinion, the collapsing of the biosphere due to the excessive burning of greenhouse gases. That's putting pressure on all of our food systems, our water systems, and creating a great climate migration now in the 2020s. In the last 150 years, when we have been operating on coal and oil, principally natural gas in the more modern context, we have become a world of 8 billion human beings that are reliant on fossil fuels to drive the global GDP, which is about $80 trillion all in. 196 countries. The USA is the largest economy. China's number 2. And from there, Japan and the rest. The point I'm making is that the engine for this economic system is the burning of oil, coal, and gas, principally, to drive the machine. And that we are not being cognizant of the fact that the result of this type of energy production is putting a lot of stress on the natural world. So specifically, if you're talking about the energy markets in terms of the price of gas or the price of oil or even coal, we have to look at the market forces that are driving that. And so, but without acknowledging the effects on our food systems and our water systems, we're simply not being honest on a balance sheet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. The current energy crisis has been described by many experts as the worst yet in history. Worse than what happened in the 70s when the Western world is in particular faced petroleum shortages and prices rose. How does that compare to the energy crisis of today?
The difference between then and now is 50 years ago, our global population was about 4 billion people. So we've doubled. We've doubled the human population, we've doubled the demand. And so that we have a situation where we've become reliant upon foreign oil in the United States, the Middle East, um, Russia, other places, South America, for our supplies. T. Boone Pickens, who was an AREDAY alumni, he came 5 times to our conference when he was still alive, came up with the Pickens Plan, which was basically predicated on the fact that America, the United States, should become energy independent, and that we should be able to produce our own energy here and stop giving 600 or 800 billion away to foreign powers that don't like us so much. To solve the energy crisis today and to compare and contrast to 1974, 2023, I really think that we have to look at supply and demand, and the fact that we are now at just under $4 a gallon. We were at $5 a gallon for gasoline in the United States 6 months ago, which produced record profits for the fossil fuel industry. Exxon, Chevron, British Petroleum, and all the rest. And that they're not putting that money back into the great energy transformation that needs to be taking place right now at the speed and scale necessary to get us off of being dependent on foreign oil, and also reducing the greenhouse gas throughput to the atmosphere.
The question, of course, following to what we just said, is that are we still facing an energy crisis today? Because we see that the crude oil prices have dropped to below $100 from more than $100 during the pandemic, and the gas prices have significantly dropped as well. Do you, especially here in the US, do you really feel that we are facing an energy crisis? Can we claim that we are facing an energy crisis here in the US?
Honestly, to tell you the truth, I think that we're facing a crisis of consciousness. The humans have to understand that there are not endless supplies of gasoline or agricultural products or water. That's a finite amount, and that we're not paying attention to the dictates of the reality of our existence on the planet. Capitalism is based on an endless supply of raw materials, and it is predicated on growth. But there are limits to growth, and that we're hitting those limits right now, and we're experiencing that in the form of, just take Colorado River, for example, at its lowest point in 20 years from a mega drought. Recently, I paid a visit out to Lake Mead and the Hoover Dam, and it's shocking. It's shocking how low the water is at the bottom of the intake. They can barely even spin the turbines for electricity. That water supplies 40 million people in the desert Southwest, Las Vegas, Los Angeles, Phoenix, Tucson. 40% of the water in Phoenix, supplying 8 million people, comes from the Colorado River. So we're facing extreme crises. in the natural world. And I believe that we are facing that because of how it is that we're looking at energy. We need to move very quickly to solar, wind. Energy efficiency is the biggest one of all. Once I'm a very smart person said, and I'll quote Amory Lovins here, that there's more money to be made in saving energy than there is in producing it. That's a heck of a statement to make in a world that's based on the extraction and the burning of fossil fuels. But it's true because of how inefficient we are throughout the system. All of the heat and the air conditioning that we generate in our buildings, in the built environment, in all of our cities, these buildings are very inefficient. It goes right out through the roof, out through the windows. So we're burning dollars into the atmosphere every single day. That translates into the transportation sector as well, in terms of how we burn gasoline in a ICE or internal combustion engine. The inefficiencies are extreme. I mean, think about it.
Yeah.
An automobile that weighs 4,000, 5,000 pounds is made out of iron, steel, plastic, rubber. Okay, it takes 20 gallons of gasoline in the fuel tank. So what is it designed to do? To move your body 180 pounds from point A to point B. But really, we're moving 5,000 pounds of iron. Very inefficiently, we're burning out the tailpipe about 90% of the energy in the form of heat and exhaust, fossil fuels, carbon dioxide. The point is that we could be redesigning our living world to be much more efficient, and therefore that would translate itself into wealth. You know, this is called climate wealth, creating climate wealth. Another AREDAY alumni, Jigar Shah, who now runs the loan department at the Department of Energy, wrote a book about this very subject. I recommend all of your listeners to pick up that book. And also, Amory Lovins wrote a book with Paul Hawken and Hunter Lovins called Natural Capitalism. Very important book for those watching today's program.
Thank you for sharing that. Fatih Birol, he's the executive director of the International Energy Agency. At last year's Davos meeting, he said we do not need to choose between an energy crisis and a climate change crisis. We can solve both, as he said, both of them with the right investment. What is your view about the question, is the right investment? What is the right investment needed in the energy sector right now, according to your view?
He's absolutely right. And that the investment in the energy sector globally, from Abu Dhabi to Beijing, from Australia to Canada, United States and Europe, needs to be into this conversation we're having about efficiency and renewable energy. The renewables, as you know, have been coming on very strong since the beginning of the century. We have installed northwards of 200,000 megawatts of wind energy in the United States. When I began AREDAY, we were only at 2,500. So it's been the strongest growth sector of the utility scale electricity industry in the country, seconded by solar, which has come on very strong since around 2015 with the efficiencies created in the Chinese manufacture of the solar panels. But that's two areas. We also have to talk about regeneration of our soils and how we do agriculture. And if we start going sector by sector and reinvesting in doing the smart things instead of doing the dumb things, to put it very simply, we can very quickly reduce the pollution in our atmosphere and our cities. You know, I would remind you that when COVID shut down and locked down the citizens of the United States for about 2 months, all of a sudden the skies cleared in Los Angeles. You could see the mountains. The animals began to come out and into the cities and the parks, because all of a sudden the birds could go and breathe for a minute, okay? And we saw that we have that propensity, we have that capability to be able to actually reinvigorate the Earth's natural systems that go in turn to reinvigorate the Earth's financial systems. They are connected. We cannot separate Wall Street from Green Street, meaning, you know, the main street of all of the agricultural communities in our world, and that in fact they are intricately connected and tied together. So as the investment community in New York City and the other markets around the world, London, Tokyo, etc., begin to rethink their strategy about energy investment, I suggest that they look very strongly and very carefully about what sustains us as opposed to what deteriorates the natural world.
That's a very good point. Scientists in the US recently had a successful nuclear fusion experiment, but they don't. But they say we should not expect this to be applied in a commercial power generation, at least for the next decade. There is also a level of apprehension when it comes to nuclear plants because of situations like Fukushima, Chernobyl. What is your view about the best options, if there are any, for energy that haven't been explored besides the wind and solar that we are exploring now? Are there any others?
Look, I am not pro or con with nuclear, okay? I realize that we have about 30 or so nuclear plants in the United States that are producing electricity without burning carbon into the atmosphere. I also know that the waste is very, very difficult to manage and handle. It's very dangerous, this fissile material that can also be made into weapons grade material that could. So we have to be careful about that. However, I want to make sure that everybody understands that when we're talking about nuclear energy or hydro energy, those forms of electricity production do not produce carbon into the atmosphere at the point of the generation. Nuclear has been proven to be extremely expensive to build new plants, and that's why it hasn't happened. It's an economic non-starter in the old formula. However, there have been breakthroughs lately, and there's a lot of hope on nuclear fission to be able to, fusion, sorry, to be able to create power that doesn't produce the kinds of waste materials and could be, in fact, one of the great energy sources of the future of the planet. But we still have to pay attention to where we get the uranium and how that's handled regarding a nuclear powered world. So I'm hopeful that we can actually have some of these new IFR, they call them, the integrated fast reactors. They're very small. They can power buildings or communities, cities, villages. Maybe they'll even have one the size of a home that you can use effectively. So I think that there's a lot of hope in there.
Mm-hmm. Green or renewable energy is often mentioned when we talk about transitioning from fossil fuels, but considering how climate change appears to be throwing our weather out of gear in the next in recent years, the question is how reliable can they be for the future?
Wind and sun are intermittent. So the utility companies don't like them. They like to use them as peaker power. But the base load in our grid system is generally comes from coal and gas for the base load. 24/7. When you want to turn on the switch, you want the power to be there. However, and when people come back and they turn on their air conditioners or everybody turns on their TV sets all at once, that's the peaker power that they then pull much of the time from the solar and the wind. Now that batteries are becoming a utility scale viable option for storage, we have the option now to use the wind and the solar as baseload. And we must do that because the continued burning, and I'll say it again, of coal, oil, and gas is collapsing the biosphere. It's acidifying the oceans, and it's creating and wreaking havoc around the world. We must make the transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy, to where we don't use fossil fuels at all. And we must work with the oil companies and the coal companies and the gas companies to do that. They're in the energy business. So it's not like we're going to take away their jobs. No, we're going to just retrain them in order to be able to functionally work within the renewable energy sector. That's the future. We know this, and that's why, quite frankly, it's been one of the strongest growth sectors over the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure you know that there are a lot of pushbacks on transitioning to green energy, both in the US, in Europe. The question is, how do we get skeptics to get on board to this transitioning and make this transition possible?
Well, I think I just told you the answer to that. We must work with them and make sure that they.
Is that enough?
At the table. I'm sorry.
Is that enough? Does it need more stricter imposing regulation or other political will?
I agree with that. We need to have the political will. We need to have the legislation in place. We need to have a global price on carbon that's forcing this, creating the economic opportunities for people to make money by burning less carbon. There's no doubt about the fact that there needs to be a global carbon tax, or at least a global price point on carbon. I will tell you a very quick story that's very inspirational. Richard Branson created something called the B Team. My colleague Keith Tuffley, who now is over at Citi, he ran the B Team for the first 3 years, and this is a group of global CEOs that were members, like Paul Pullman from Unilever, Mark Benioff from Salesforce, Branson from Virgin. And the conversation was, in lieu of the fact that we do not have a price on carbon, these multinational corporations would internalize the price on carbon, and they would apply it to their distribution chains and their supply lines, such that they would save energy from burning less by becoming more efficient, and that translated to the bottom line for the shareholder. So it was a win-win-win, where we are making more money by burning less pollution, by burning less carbon. And that's how we must look at this. There is an opportunity here in the transition and in the pushback. I will also say that Sultan Al Jaber, who is the chair of COP28 in Abu Dhabi that will take place in Dubai, is also one of the leading proponents of renewable energy, even though he is the CEO of ADNOC, which is the Abu Dhabi National Oil Company. So how can that be? Well, because King Zayed, who died at the turn of the century, said that we will have to transition from oil to these renewable energies, and then the royal family and the other leaders in Abu Dhabi have been following that. So I want you to know, and your listeners to know, that people are very hard at work on this transition. I've been to the World Future Energy Summit a couple of times, all the way over there in Abu Dhabi, and I will tell you that the ministers of the oil-producing nations are very well aware of this transition, and they know that we're moving from internal combustion motors, ICE, internal combustion engines, to EV, electric vehicles. And the electric vehicles must be charged by renewable energy, solar and wind, in this global energy transition that really constitutes the great global energy transformation that we're undergoing right now.
Mhm. There is no doubt that the war in Ukraine has reshaped the energy supply situation around the world. Considering that it takes about 4 to 8 years, if I am right, on average, to build a wind farm, how do we ease the problem in the short to medium term?
Well, I mean, look at what Europe has done. They were very dependent on Russian gas, and in very quickly, in 6 months, they weaned themselves off, and now they're getting the LNG shipments from other countries, and they're supplying their uh, their energy needs for heating in a cold time in the winter. So we need to work together in partnership, but simultaneously continue the massive rollout of offshore wind farms in Scotland and England, not to mention in Spain. I'd like to see some of these happening in the Mediterranean. I don't see much of that yet. Also covering North Africa with the massive solar gain. It's a very strong solar resource. Some of my colleagues in London are putting in cables at the bottom of the ocean to take this clean, renewable energy, electricity up from North Africa to the UK. These are the kinds of strategies that are happening as we speak. When I was in Beijing in 2018 and on to Ningxia in Yinchan, where I was speaking at a conference, and I was shown the largest solar installation on the planet, 100 square kilometers, and they held the solar panels up with space in between so they could grow the goji berries between. So there's very high quality energy and also very high quality food in the same land. It demonstrated what's possible. Now this is 10 years old. That's not even efficient photovoltaics today, but it does exist. And across the valley was also shown to us the great lignite fields and these coal plants that were so, it was very frightening and shocking how much coal they were burning, and the air was just thick. You couldn't even see it. So there you had on one side the solar and the clean energy, on the other side the dirty energy. And these are choices that we must make as governments, as global societies, as 8 billion human beings going forward from this day today. And I will say that this is something that cannot be rolled back. It can't be pushed back. It started. Um, Even George W. Bush, in his first and second term, was very proactively uh, allowing for the wind and the solar, especially in Texas, where he came from, where he was the governor. They have a very strong success story in the state of Texas, where they shut down 10 very large coal plants that they wanted to put in there, and then they went for wind energy on that ERCOT system. I'd like you to know that in the United States, the U.S. grid comes in three sections. There's the Eastern grid, the Western grid, and the Texas grid. And they don't really talk to each other very well. And these grids are controlled by utilities, by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and then by 50 states with their own public utility commissions, the PUC. These are the regulatory bodies that allow for the electricity to come on and be distributed. And that these power lines, these very large lines, are very inefficient. When we burn coal for a centralized power distribution and ship it hundreds of miles across these sections of grid, sometimes we experience line loss of energy up to 30%. 30% line loss. This is very inefficient. So as we move into a distributed form of energy where the wind farms are producing when the wind is blowing and putting that into a local, a regional grid system that are being built out, but they're not there yet. So far, we put it into the big grids, and again, it's used as peaker power because we're not storing it. We're just taking it when it's blowing. But with batteries, we can store it. And then finally, I want to say that I am part of a group that has been exploring the implementation of something called a high voltage direct current supergrid. And this supergrid that comes out of our US government studies from NOAA, starting back in 2007. Many government labs have been tackling this. This supergrid, this HVDC supergrid would go down the highway systems of our country, okay, the interstate highway. It would be buried, but it would also go down the rail corridors, the train corridors. So that's largely privately held, whereas the highway systems are publicly held. So this is a true public-private partnership. But this supergrid can take renewable energy from anywhere in the United States immediately and put it in there and move it across the entire nation if needed. These are the kinds of things that are coming. And when the president puts $2 trillion on the table in the form of the IRA and the BIL, these infrastructure bills, and the Inflation Recovery Act, this money is earmarked for these kinds of transitions in all of the various sectors, but particularly in the energy sector, it is needed the most. And so we must deploy this capital and help the president to implement this grand energy transition that burns less coal, oil, and gas, and we must decarbonize the entire system all the way through, everywhere. The transportation sector, the built environment.
How soon? What is the timeline, if any? Is there any timeline for that?
Timeline is as soon as possible. There are some goals where we are going to cut 50%, half of all of the greenhouse gas emissions by 2030. That's in 7 years. 7. That's very quickly coming. And that's a national mandate that all of the government agencies now are taking a look at, whether it's agriculture, the Department of Energy, transportation, etc. So that's what this money is on the table to do. It's to stimulate the economy. My colleague Jigar Shah over at the loans department of the Department of Energy is there. They have $40 billion ready to loan out for these kinds of innovative approaches to energy efficiency and decarbonizing our not only our economic system of the United States and our energy system of the United States, but also the actual atmosphere itself and the oceans as well. Let's not forget the oceans. It's very important to remember the ocean. The ocean is 71% of the planet, 71%. So we have to have a healthy, viable ocean in order to have a healthy, viable land.
Yeah. Often when we talk about the energy crisis and alternatives, the focus is on the energy to power our homes, vehicles, right? How about the energy we use in our homes for cooking and heating during the winter? Are there any alternatives to heating oil, for instance, since the price for heat this winter is considerably higher than normal for many homes across Europe and America?
Yes, this is an issue, I know, and I am in favor of there being a mandate for us to turn to electricity that's derived from clean energy sources. That's critical. That then would there's these new conductive stoves that they have that allows us to cook very quickly with electricity, just like gas, and very precisely, but in a way that conserves energy. So I think that we can solve this problem of the gas that is in such high demand and difficult to transport by replacing the stoves in our homes with electricity.
I think we had a great discussion with a lot of insightful views and aspects that you contributed to this discussion. Chip, I would like, before we conclude, to give us a little bit of an overview about what the American Renewable Energy Institute does, because we didn't talk about this, and I would like to have the viewers getting a better understanding about the work that it does, the impact it has.
Yes, thank you. Okay, so the American Renewable Energy Institute is a 501c3 nonprofit that was founded in 2011 and is the parent company of the AREDAY Summit, the American Renewable Energy Day Summit, that has been going since 2004. We did 16 consecutive summits in Aspen until 2019 when the COVID shut us down. We are coming back this year, and we will be making some announcements about our summit in shortly. But to say that over that period of time, we were very blessed to have had a very illustrious group come and attend the summits over the years. Ted Turner was there for 5 times, T. Boone Pickens 5 times. We were honored to have President Jimmy Carter in 2014, the former the former Prime Minister of Australia, Kevin Rudd in 2015, and the President of Iceland, Olafur Grimsson, in 2016. Also, Tom Steyer has graced our stage 3 times, but people like Jesse Jackson have been through there, senators, governors, and also captains of industry in solar, wind, and energy efficiency. So it's a very very powerful gathering of thought leaders to inform themselves and then the world about what their strategies are. It's been a place to create partnerships and collaborations, come up with new strategies to create this global energy transition. And it's also located in Aspen, Colorado, in order to attract some of the world leaders and the kings of industry who live there, in order to for them to learn about how they can make new investments into this global transition to clean energy and energy efficiency.
And when is the next summit scheduled for?
Right. So we haven't announced yet. We're looking at August, but the dates are not firm. So that will be coming out in weeks ahead. But before that, I will say that my board member, Tremel Crow, who has Earth X in Dallas, Texas, that is coming up on April 20, 21, 22, 23. And I recommend that everybody go down to Dallas to attend this, because this is where one of the big renewable energy conferences, there's a Congress of conferences, there's 20 of them, and that AREI will be heavily involved and AREDAY in populating those conferences and helping to bring our alumni to Texas. And it's important to recognize that Democrats and Republicans must come together on this issue. So my metaphor that I like to say the most is, while both Ted Turner and T. Boone Pickens were at AREDAY 5 times out of 16 years. And while Ted Turner may be to the left of John Lennon and T. Boone Pickens to the right of Attila the Hun, they come together. Red and blue meet in the middle on the green, on the AREDAY stage. And the green is the color of money and the color of trees, where the environment and the economy come together. So renewables are good for everybody. This is not a Republican issue or a Democratic issue. This is an American issue. And so Dallas, Texas is a very good place for this kind of conversation to come together and create the bridges necessary for the future of our country. So I would highly recommend that in Dallas, and also and we'll be check the website areday.net. That's areday.net, and we will be making announcements soon about the upcoming summit in Aspen this summer.
In August, close to August. And are media invited? Is it open to media?
Of course, yes. There are media opportunities. It will be a very scaled down summit. We're working on a very high level summit this year. We have not had a summit in 3 years. 19 was our last one. Our big keynote speaker was Tom Steyer. He was a presidential candidate at that time, but we also put a spotlight on the climate youth leadership. So Shea Bastida, who is like Greta Thunberg, was there, as well as many other notable leaders. And we had 165 speakers actually in 2019. We're going to scale that back, but we will come back in 2023. We have been out of commission for 3 years due to the global pandemic, like many others.
Yeah. Keep us posted, and we will be more than happy to share the information about the upcoming August.
Wonderful, Thanos. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chip. Thank you for your time.
I appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Of course.
And the
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Thank you.